then swept along, denuded of its robes. It snapped the mast off close to the keel, but as the backstay, which was a leather rope, had fallen across the mast, I used it to lash mast and keel together, and astride these two timbers I became the sport of the furious winds. The storm that had blown up from the west subsided soon enough, but it was quickly followed by more wind from the south, to my great distress. For this meant that I should have once more to retrace my course to the dread Charybdis. All through the night I was swept along, and at sunrise found myself back at Scylla's Rock, and that appalling whirlpool. Charybdis was beginning to suck the salt water down, and as she did so, I swung myself up to the great fig tree, on which I got a tight grip and clung like a bat. I could find no foothold to support me, or any means of climbing into the tree, for its roots were far away below, and the great long branches that overshadowed Charybdis stretched high above my head. However, I clung grimly on until she spewed up my mast and keel once more. I longed for them to reappear, and in the end they did. At the time of day when a judge with a long list of disputes Book 13. Odysseus lands in Ithaca. Odysseus' tale was finished. Held in the spell of his words, they all remained still and silent throughout the shadowy hall, till at last Alcinous turned to his guest and said, "Odysseus, now that you have set foot on the bronze floor of my great house, I feel assured that you will reach your home without any further wanderings from your course, though you have suffered much. But now, friends, this is my wish. Let it stand as an order to every one of you who comes to my palace to drink the sparkling wine of the elders and enjoy the minstrel's song. The clothing, gold ornaments, and other presents that our counselors brought here are already packed for our guest in a polished strongbox. I now suggest that in addition, we each give him a large tripod and a cauldron. Later, we will recoup ourselves by a collection from the people, since it would be hard on us singly to show such generosity with no return." Alcinous' proposal was approved, and all went home to their beds. As soon as dawn came, fresh and rosy-fingered, they came bustling down to the ship with their welcome bronzeware gifts, and the great Alcinous himself went up and down the vessel, stowing them carefully under the benches, so that they would not hamper any of the crew as they pulled on the oars. This done, they returned for a banquet to Alcinous' palace, and great Alcinous slew an ox for them to sacrifice to Zeus of the black cloud, the son of Cronos, who is lord of all. They burnt the thighs and settled down to enjoy the splendid feast, while in their midst the people's favourite, Demodocus, that divine bard, sang to the music of his lyre. But Odysseus kept turning his face to the blazing sun, impatient for it to set, as he was longing to be on his way. He was like a ploughman who yearns for his supper after his 2 brown oxen have pulled the ploughshare up and down the field all day. The sunset is welcome to him, and his legs are weary as he plods homeward. Like him, Odysseus welcomed the setting of the sun that day. No sooner was it set than he appealed to the Phaeacians, those lovers of the oar, and to Alcinous in particular. Lord Alcinous, my most worshipful prince, make your drink offerings now and see me safely off. And farewell to you all, for now my dearest wishes have been fulfilled. I have your escort home, and I have your welcome gifts. May the gods in heaven bless them, and may I find my wife and loved ones safe and sound on my return home. As for you whom I leave behind, may you all bring happiness to your good wives and to your children, and may the gods prosper you in every way, and keep your people from harm. The speech of Odysseus won the approval of the whole company. They felt he had spoken in the right way, and so now gave instructions that their guest should be sent on his way. Mighty Alcinous called to his squire. "Pontonous," he said, "mix a bowl of wine and serve everyone in the hall so that we can make a drink offering to father's use before seeing our visitor off to the land of his birth." Pontonous mixed the mellow wine, went his rounds, and served each of the guests, who from their seats then made libations to the blessed gods that lived in the far-flung heavens. Then the gallant Odysseus rose from his chair and put his 2-handled cup in Arete's hands. He spoke, and his words were winged. "My queen, here's fortune all your life, until man's common lot, old age and death comes to you. I take my leave of you now. Here in your home, may you be happy in your children, your people, and Alcinous, your king."
Hello, everybody.
With this, the noble Odysseus stepped across the threshold. Mighty Alcinous ordered a squire to accompany him and lead him to the good ship on the seashore. Arete sent with him a party of serving women, one with a clean cloak and tunic, another in charge of his strongbox, and a third carried bread and red wine. When they had come down to the ship in the sea, the young nobles who were to escort him took charge of his baggage, including all the food and drink, and stowed it in the polished ship. For Odysseus himself they spread a rug and sheet on the ship's deck, well aft, so that he might enjoy unbroken sleep. Then he too climbed on board and quietly lay down, while the crew took their seats at the oars in order and untied the cable from the pierced stone that held it. No sooner had they swung back and churned the water with their blades, than sweet oblivion sealed Odysseus' eyes in sleep, delicious and profound, the very counterfeit of death.
Hello, Tishan.
And now, like a team of 4 stallions on the plain who start as one at the touch of the whip, leaping forward to make short work of the course, so the stern of the ship leaped forward, and a great dark wave of the surrounding sea surged in her wake. With unfaltering speed she forged ahead, and not even the wheeling falcon, the fastest creature that flies, could have kept her company. Thus she sped lightly on, cutting her way through the waves and carrying a man wise as the gods are wise, who in long years of war on land and wandering across the cruel seas had suffered many agonies of spirit, but was now lapped in peaceful sleep, forgetting all he had endured. When the brightest of all stars came up, the star which often ushers in the tender light of early dawn, the ship's voyage was done, and she drew near to Ithaca. Now in that island is a cove named after Phorcys, the old man of the sea, with 2 projecting headlands sheered to seaward, but sloping down on the side towards the harbour. They protect it from the heavy swell raised by rough weather in the open, and allow large ships to ride inside without tying up, once they are within mooring distance of the shore. At the head of the cove grows a long-leaved olive tree, and nearby is a pleasant hazy cavern sacred to the nymphs whom we call naiads. This cave contains a number of stone basins and two-handled jars, which are used by bees as their hives. Also great looms of stone where the nymphs weave marvelous fabrics of sea purple. And there are springs whose water never fails. The cave has two mouths. The one that looks north is the way down for men. The other, facing south, is for the gods. And as immortals come in by this way, men do not trespass there. It was here that the Phaeacians put in, knowing the place, and such was the headway of the ship, rowed by those able hands, that a full half of her keel's length mounted the beach. They rose from the benches, jumped
Hey,
out,
babies.
and made it their first task to lift Odysseus, sheet, glossy rug and all, out of the hollow ship, and deposit him on the sand, still fast asleep. Next they took out all the treasures which, at the prompting of the great-hearted Athena, their noble countrymen had given him when he left for home. These they stacked in a pile by the trunk of the olive tree, well away from the path, in case some passer-by should find them before he awoke and robbed him. This done, they set out for home. And now the lord of the earthquake, who had by no means forgotten the threats he had once uttered against the noble Odysseus, asked Zeus what he intended. Father Zeus, the immortal gods will lose respect for me, now that these mortals fail to respect the Phaeacians,
T.S. man.
who after all are my descendants. I said that Odysseus would suffer much before he reached his home, though I never put a final ban on his return, once you had promised it and nodded your assent. But now these people have brought him over the sea in their good ship and landed him asleep in Ithaca, after showering gifts upon him, countless gifts of bronze, gold, and woven stuffs, far more than he could
Like
ever
the
have
little
won
boy.
himself from Troy, even if he had
Hey,
come
hey.
back unhurt with his fair share of the spoils. Really, replied Zeus, the gatherer of the clouds. How can you, the great and mighty Earthshaker, say such a thing? It is not true that the gods don't respect you. It would indeed be a serious matter if they made disrespectful remarks about the eldest and best of their company. As for mankind, if anyone in the pride of his power treats you with disrespect, you have all the future in which to take your revenge. You are free to please yourself. Act as your heart directs. Lord of the Black Cloud, Poseidon answered him. I should indeed like to do as you say, but I have always respected your anger and tried to avoid it. Now, however, I propose to wreck that fine ship of the Phaeacians on the misty seas as she comes back from her mission, to teach them once and for all to give up this habit of escorting travelers. And I will also fence their town with a ring of high mountains. Dear brother, said the gatherer of the clouds, this is what I think best. When all eyes in the city are fixed on the ship's approach, turn her into a rock looking like a ship offshore. Everyone will be astounded. Then there's no need to throw a circle of high mountains round their city. When he heard this answer from Zeus, Poseidon made for Scheria, where the Phaeacians live, and there he waited till the approaching ship, making good headway, came close to the land. The Earthshaker then drew near to her, and with one blow from the flat of his hand, turned her into stone and rooted her to the sea bottom. Then he went away. The Phaeacian spectators, oarsmen themselves and seamen of repute, looked at each other and cried out in words that flew. Who in heaven's name has stopped our swift ship out at sea as she was making port? Only a moment ago she was in full view. They might well ask, for they had no inkling of what had happened till Alcinous explained. Alas, he cried, my father's prophecy of long ago comes back to me. He used to maintain that Poseidon resented our giving safe conduct to all and sundry, and he foretold that one day he would wreck one of our fine ships on the high seas as she was returning from such a mission. and would overshadow our city with a ring of high mountains. That is what the old man used to say. And now, it's all coming true. But listen and accept what I say. For the future, give up your custom of seeing home any traveler who comes to our city. And for the present, let us sacrifice 12 picked bulls to Poseidon. He may take pity on us and refrain from hemming in our town with a long mountain range.
Here's the little ginger baby.
In great trepidation, they at once
Do you
prepared
see
their
little
horse for
ginger kitten?
sacrifice. So the chieftains and councillors of the Phaeacian people gathered round the altar and interceded with the Lord
Well,
Poseidon.
I have lots of cats. 5 adults, 5 kittens, a stray cat and 2 other it. My son's dad's. So 13 really.
Her intention was to make Odysseus unrecognizable,
Currently
to tell him
13.
precisely how things stood, and to prevent his being recognized by his wife and friends, or the people of the town, before the suitors had paid for all their transgressions. As a result, everything in Ithaca, the long hill paths, the welcoming bays, the beetling rocks and the leafy trees, seemed unfamiliar to its king. He leapt to his feet and stood staring at his native land. Then he groaned, and slapping his thighs with his hands, he cried out in dismay. "Oh, no.
Hello?
Whose country have I come to this time? Are they some brutal tribe of uncivilized savages? Or a kindly and God-fearing people? Where shall I put all these goods of mine, and where on earth am I myself to go? If only I had stayed there with the Phaeacians. Then I could have gone on to some other powerful prince who would have received me well and seen me on my way home. As it is, I don't know where to hide them, and I certainly can't leave them here, or someone else will steal them. And what a blow to find that those Phaeacian lords and chieftains were not exactly wise and honest men. They said they would put me down in my own sunny Ithaca, and then they carry me off to this outlandish place. A broken promise, for which I pray they may be punished by Zeus, the god of suppliants, who watches all mankind and punishes offenders. But now I had better count my belongings and make sure that the crew have not robbed me and gone off with anything in their hollow ship." With that, he checked his fine tripods and cauldrons, his gold and his splendid woven fabrics, and found not a single item missing. So his thoughts turned to his native land, and, homesick and grieving, he dragged himself along the shore of the sounding sea. Athena now appeared, disguised as a young shepherd, with all the delicate beauty that marks the sons of kings. A handsome cloak was folded back across her shoulders. She had sandals on her glistening feet, and she carried a javelin in her hand. She was a welcome sight to Odysseus, who came forward at once and spoke winged words. "Good day to you, friend. Since you are the first person I have met in this place, do not be hostile, but save these treasures and save me. So I pray to you as I would to a god and kneel at your feet. But tell me exactly where I am. What part of the world is this? What is the country called, and who live here? Is it one of the sunny islands, or is this fertile slope running down to the sea part of the mainland?" "Sir," said the goddess of the gleaming eyes, "you must be a simpleton or have traveled very far from your home to ask me what this country is. It has a name by no means inglorious. In fact, it is known to thousands, to all the peoples who live in the direction of dawn and sunrise, and all who live in the opposite direction, towards the twilight west. True, it is rugged and unfit for driving horses, and though not extensive, it is very far from poor. Corn grows well, and there is wine too. Rain and fresh dew are never lacking, and it has excellent pasture for goats and cattle, timber of all kinds, and watering places that never fail. And so, my friend, the name of Ithaca has traveled even as far as Troy, and that, they say, is a good good long way from Achaea. Odysseus' patient heart leapt up as Pallas Athena, daughter of Aegis-bearing Zeus, told him its name, and he revelled in the knowledge that he was on his native soil. He addressed her with words on wings, but not with the truth. True as ever to his own interests, he held back the words that were on his lips. "Of course," he said. "I heard tell of Ithaca even over there across the sea in the spacious land of Crete. And now I have come here myself with all this booty, leaving the other half of my fortune to my children. For I am an exile. I had killed Idomeneus' son, the great runner Orsilochus, who was faster on his feet than any living man in the whole island of Crete. He tried to fleece me of all the booty I had won at Troy, my reward for the long-drawn agonies of war and all the miseries of voyages by sea, merely because I refused to obey his father and serve under him at Troy, and preferred to lead my own command. So, with a friend at my side, I laid an ambush for him at the side of the road, and struck him with my bronze spear as he was coming in from the country. There was a pitch-black sky that night covering the heavens, and not a soul saw us, so no one knew that it was I who'd killed him. However, with the man's blood fresh on my hands, I hastily sought out a Phoenician ship and threw myself on the mercy of its honest crew. I made them a suitable payment from my booty and told them to take me on board and set me down in Pylos, or the good land of Elis, where the Epeans rule. But the wind was too strong and drove them off their course, much to their distress, for they had no wish to cheat me. Driven back from there, we reached this island during the night, and made the harbor by dint of rowing. And though we badly needed food, not a man among us thought of his supper. We all tumbled out of the ship and lay down just as we were. I was so exhausted that I fell sound asleep. Meanwhile, the crew fetched my belongings out of the good ship and put them down on the sand where I lay. After which they embarked once more and set sail for their own fine city of Sidon, leaving me and my troubles behind. That was Odysseus' story. The bright-eyed goddess smiled at him and caressed him with her hand. She now wore the appearance of a woman, tall, beautiful, and accomplished. Then she spoke, and her words winged their way to him. "Anyone who met you, even a god, would have to be a consummate trickster to surpass you in subterfuge. You were always an obstinate, cunning, and irrepressible intriguer. So you don't propose even in your own country to drop the tricks and lying tales you love so much. But no more of this. We both know how to get our own way. In the world of men, you have no rival in judgment and argument, while I am preeminent among the gods for ingenuity and ability to get what I want. And yet, you did not recognize Pallas Athena, daughter of Zeus, who always stands by your side and guards you through all your adventures. It was I who made all the Phaeacians take to you so kindly. And here I am once more, to contrive a cunning scheme with you, to hide the treasures that the Phaeacian nobles, prompted by me, gave you when you left for home, and to warn you of all the trials you will have to undergo within your palace. Bear these with patience, for bear them you must. Tell not a single person, man or woman, that you are back from your wanderings, but endure all aggravation in silence, and submit yourself to the indignities that will be put upon you." "Goddess," the nimble-witted Odysseus replied, "it is hard for a man to recognize you at sight, however expert he may be, for you are always changing your disguise. But this I know well, that you were gracious to me in the old days so long as we Achaeans were campaigning at Troy. Yet when we had sacked Priam's lofty citadel and gone on board our ships, and a god had scattered the Achaean fleet, I did not notice you then, daughter of Zeus, nor see you set foot on my ship to save me from any of my ordeals. No, I was left to wander through the world with a stricken heart, till the gods put an end to my sufferings, and the day came, in the rich land of the Phaeacians, when you comforted me with your talk, and yourself guided me to their city. But now I beseech you in your father's name, since I cannot believe that I have come to my bright Ithaca, but feel that I must be wandering in some foreign country, and that you spoke as you did in a spirit of provocation to lead me astray. Tell me, am I really back in my own beloved land? That shows how your mind always works, said Athena, goddess of the flashing eyes. And that is why I cannot desert you in your misfortunes. You are so persuasive, so quick-witted, so self-possessed. Any other man on returning from his travels would have rushed home in high spirits to see his children and his wife. You, on the contrary, are in no hurry even to ask questions and to learn the news. No, with your own eyes you must first make sure of your wife, who, by the way, does nothing but sit at home with her eyes never free from tears as the slow nights and days pass sorrowfully by. As for your homecoming, I myself was never in any doubt. I knew in my heart that you would get back, though with the loss of all your men. But you must understand that I was not prepared to oppose my uncle Poseidon, who was incensed when you blinded his own son, and has nursed his grudge against you. And now, to convince you, let me show you the Ithacan scene. Here is the harbour of Phorcys, the old man of the sea, and there at the head of the harbour is the long-leaved olive tree, and nearby the pleasant hazy cave that is sacred to the nymphs, whom men call naiads. This is the broad-vaulted cavern where you made many potent sacrifices to the nymphs. The forest-clad slopes behind are those of Mount Neriton. As she spoke, the goddess dispersed the mist, and the countryside stood plain to view. Joy came at last to the noble, long-suffering Odysseus. Overjoyed at the sight of his own land, he kissed the fertile soil, then with uplifted hands invoked the nymphs. I had thought, you nymphs of the springs, you daughters of Zeus, that I should never set eyes on you again. Accept my greetings and my loving prayers. I will give gifts too, as in days gone by, if this warrior daughter of Zeus allows me to live and see my son grow up. Be bold, said Athena of the flashing eyes, and dismiss all such worries from your heart. Our immediate task is to hide your goods in some corner of this sacred cave, where they may lie in safety. After that, we must decide on our best course for the future. The goddess now plunged into the gloom of the cavern to explore it for a hiding place, while Odysseus set about bringing in all his belongings, the gold, the indestructible bronze, and the fine fabrics the Phaeacians had given him. After he had stowed them carefully away, Pallas Athena, daughter of Zeus, closed the entrance with a stone. The two of them then sat down by the trunk of the sacred olive tree to scheme the downfall of the presumptuous suitors. The bright-eyed goddess was the first to speak. Odysseus, favorite of Zeus, son of Laertes, master of ingenuity, consider now how you will come to grips with these shameless suitors, who for 3 whole years have been lording it in your palace, paying court to your incomparable wife and offering her marriage gifts. All this time she has pined for your homecoming, and though she has given them all some grounds for hope, and made promises in private messages to each, her real wishes are very different. Great heavens, cried Odysseus of the nimble wits. I would certainly have come to the same miserable end as King Agamemnon directly I set foot in my home, if you, goddess, had not made all this clear to me. But come, devise some ingenious scheme to punish these miscreants, and take your stand at my side, filling me with the spirit that dares all, as you did on the day when we pulled down Troy's shining diadem of towers. Ah, lady of the bright eyes, if only you would aid me with such eagerness as you did then, I could fight against 300 with you beside me, gracious goddess, with your wholehearted support to count on. I will indeed stand at your side, Athena, the bright-eyed goddess, answered. I shall not forget you when the time comes for this task of ours. As for those suitors who are wasting your fortune, I can already see them staining your broad floors with their blood and brains. But now, to work. I'm going to change you beyond recognition. I shall wither the smooth skin on your supple limbs and rob your head of its dark locks. I shall clothe you in rags that one would loathe to see on a human being, and I shall dim your bright eyes till you are repulsive to the whole gang of suitors, and even your wife and the son you left at home. And now for your part, you must first of all go to the swineherd in charge of your pigs. His heart is as loyal to you as ever, and he is devoted to your son and your wise queen Penelope. You will find him watching over his swine out at their pastures by the Raven's Crag, and at the spring of Arethusa, where they find the right fodder to make them fat and healthy, feeding on their favorite acorns and drinking water from deep pools. Stay there, sit down with him, and question him about whatever you want to know. Meanwhile, I will go to Sparta, the city of fair women, to summon Telemachus, your own son, Odysseus, who has travelled to the broad vale of Lacedaemon and visited Menelaus in the hope of hearing news of you, whether you are still alive. Resourceful Odysseus replied, But why, in your omniscience, did you not tell him that I am? Do you want him too to roam the barren seas in misery while strangers eat him out of house and home? You need not be alarmed for him, the bright-eyed goddess answered. I myself was his escort, so that he would win fame from his journey there. He is in no difficulties, but is sitting quite at ease in Menelaus' palace, in the lap of luxury. It is true that those young men in their black ship are determined to kill him before he can reach home. But I have an idea that they will not succeed. No, sooner than that, the earth will close over some of these suitors who are wasting your wealth. Athena touched him now with her wand. She withered the smooth skin on his supple limbs, robbed his head of its dark locks, covered his whole body with an old man's wrinkles, and dimmed the brightness of his fine eyes. And she changed his clothing into a shabby cloak and tunic, filthy rags grimy with smoke. Over his back she threw a large and well-worn hide of a nimble stag, and finally she gave him a staff and a poor shabby knapsack with a shoulder strap. Their plans prepared, the two parted company, and Athena went on her way to the sacred land of Lacedaemon to fetch Odysseus' son. Book 14. In Eumaeus' Hut. Odysseus turned his back on the harbour and followed a rough track leading through the woods and up to the hills, towards the place where Athena had told him he would meet the worthy swineherd, who, of all the servants Odysseus had acquired, had shown himself to be the most faithful steward of his property. He found him sitting in the porch of his hut in the farmyard, whose high walls, perched on an eminence and protected by a clearing, enclosed a fine and spacious courtyard. The herdsman had made it himself for his absent master's swine, without help from his mistress or the aged Laertes, building the wall of quarried stone with a hedge of wild pear on top. Outside he had fenced the whole length on both sides with a closely set stockade made of split oak, which he had taken from the dark heart of the logs. Inside the yard, to house the pigs at night, he had made 12 sties, all near to one another, in each of which 50 brood sows were penned, and slept on the ground. The boars slept outside the yard, and of these there were far fewer, since their numbers were constantly reduced by the frequent banquets of the courting noblemen. for whom the swineherd used at regular intervals to send down the pick of his fatted hogs. There were 360 of them. They were guarded every night by 4 dogs, as savage as wild beasts, trained by the master swineherd. He himself was busy shaping a pair of sandals to his feet, cutting them out of a piece of good brown leather. 3 of his men had gone in various directions with the pigs to their pastures. He had been obliged to send the 4th to town with a hog for the arrogant suitors to slaughter and feed on the flesh. Suddenly the baying dogs caught sight of Odysseus and flew at him, barking loudly. He had the sense to sit down and drop his staff. Even so, he would have suffered ignominious injuries then and there, at his own farm, had not the swineherd, letting the leather fall from his fingers, dashed through the gateway, shouted at the dogs, and sent them scurrying off in all directions with a shower of stones. Then he addressed his master. "Old man, that was a narrow escape. The dogs would have almost torn you to pieces in a moment, and you would have given me the rough side of your tongue. As though the gods hadn't already given me enough pain and grief. Here I sit, yearning and mourning for the best of masters and fattening his hogs for others to eat, while he himself, starving as like as not, is lost in foreign lands and tramping through strange towns, if indeed he is still alive and can see the light of day. But follow me, old man. Let's go to my hut. When you've had all the bread and wine you want, you shall tell me where you come from and what your troubles are." The good swineherd led the way to his hut, ushered Odysseus in, and invited him to sit down on some brushwood that he piled up for him, and covered with the shaggy skin of a wild goat, large and thick, which served as his own mattress. Odysseus was delighted by this welcome, and thanked him, saying, "My good host, may Zeus and the other gods grant you your dearest wish for receiving me so kindly." Homer really loved Eumaeus, this character he had created, and here, instead of writing about him, he felt impelled to speak to him directly, as if reminding him of the story. "And you, Eumaeus," the swineherd said in reply, "Stranger, it is not right for me to turn away any stranger, even one in a worse state than you are, for strangers and beggars all come in Zeus' name, and a gift from folk like us is none the less welcome for being small. Servants cannot make larger gifts when they are always in fear of their overbearing masters. I mean, these new ones. As for my old master, the gods have set their faces against his return. He would have looked after me properly, and given me possessions, a cottage and a bit of land, and a wife that any man would be glad to have, as a kind master does for a servant who has worked hard for him, and whose work heaven has prospered, as it prospers the job I toil at here. Yes, the king would have rewarded me well for this, had he grown old in Ithaca. But he is dead and gone, and I wish I could say the same of Helen and all her breed, for she has been the death of many a good man. My master, you see, was one of those who went to Ilium, the land of horses, to fight the Trojans in Agamemnon's cause." The swineherd broke off, hitched up his tunic under his belt, and went
Will you
out to the
stop?
skies where the young hawkers were penned in batches. He selected 2, carried them in, and slaughtered them both.
He gets
Then
right in my
succinctly
face.
chopped them up and skewered the meat. When he had roasted it all, he served it up piping hot on the spits, set it in front of Odysseus, and sprinkled it with white barley meal. He then mixed some mellow wine in an olive wood bowl, took a seat
Oh,
facing his guest, and encouraged him to eat. "Stranger," he said, "do have some sucking pig, which is all these servants can offer you. For our fatted hogs are eaten up by the suitors, who have no fear of the wrath to come and no pity in their hearts. Yet the blessed gods don't like wicked acts. Justice and fair play are what they respect in men. Even bloodthirsty pirates, with They've raided a foreign
The
coast
boy.
allowed by Zeus to carry off some loot, are haunted by the fear of retribution as they make for home with their ships full of plunder. So these suitors must have somehow discovered, maybe through some heaven-sent rumour, that my master has come to a disastrous
Oh
end,
boy.
which explains why they will neither pay court to his widow in the regular way, nor go home and mind their own business. Sit there instead at their ease and eat up all his livelihood in this high-handed style.
Oh.
No scrimping or saving for them. For I tell you, they slaughter
Lovely.
beasts every single day and night as you sends. Never just one or even two at a time. And they draw and swill wine like water. My master, you see, was enormously rich. There wasn't a lord on the fertile mainland or in Ithaca itself to touch him. He's worth more than 20 others rolled into one. Let me give
I
you
love
some idea.
you.
On the mainland,
You
12
know
herds
how
of
much I
cattle,
love
as
you.
many flocks of sheep, as many droves of
I
pigs,
love you,
and as
you.
many scattered herds of goats, all tended by hired labour or his own herdsman.
You're
While
my
here in
boysy
Ithaca,
boy.
11 herds of goats graze up and down the coast with reliable men to look after them. And every one of these men has day by day to choose the best of his fat goats and drive it in for the suitors. I too, who tend and keep these pigs, carefully pick out the best
Okay.
and send it down to them. While Eumaeus was talking,
I've given you lots
Odysseus
of colours.
ate the meat and drank the wine, avidly and in silence. But his brain was teeming with thoughts of what he would do to the suitors. When he had finished supper and felt satisfied, he filled the bowl he had been using and handed it to his host, brimful with wine. Eumaeus accepted with pleasure, and Odysseus now said to him with winged words, "Tell me, my friend, who was the man who bought you with his wealth, this lord whom you describe as so exceedingly rich and powerful? You said he had lost his life in Agamemnon's cause. Tell me his name, describe him. I may find that I know him. Heaven knows whether I can tell you I've met him, but I've certainly roved all over the world." "Old friend," answered the master swineherd, "no wanderer who comes here and claims to bring news of Odysseus could convince his wife and son. Beggars in need of creature comforts find lying easy. To tell a true tale is the last thing they want to do. Whenever a tramp comes to Ithaca, he goes straight to my mistress and tells a pack of lies. She welcomes him graciously and asks him every detail, point by point, while tears of distress stream down her cheeks, as is natural for a woman whose husband has met his end abroad. Even you yourself, old friend, would be quick enough to invent a tale if someone gave you a cloak and tunic to put on. As for my master, he's dead and gone. The dogs and the birds of the air must by now have torn the flesh from his bones, or the fish have eaten him in the sea, and his bones lie there on the shore with the sand piled high above them. Yes, that is how he met his end. And his death has meant nothing but grief for his friends, and for myself above all. For I shall never find so kind a master again wherever I may go, not even if I return to my parents' house, where I was born and bred. And much as I grieve for them and long to be back in my own country and set eyes on them again, it is for the lost Odysseus that my heart aches and yearns. Even in his absence, I can hardly bring myself to mention his name. He cared for me and loved me dearly, but even though he is far away, I still call him my beloved master." "Friend," said the patient good Odysseus in reply, "since you won't accept what I say, and since you have so little faith that you cannot believe he will ever return, I would not merely state that Odysseus is coming back, I will swear to it. Directly he comes and sets foot in his own house, I will claim the reward for the good news, and you can dress me in a fine new cloak and tunic. But till that moment, destitute as I am, I will accept nothing, for I loathe like the gates of Hades the man swear now by Zeus before all other gods, and by the Lord of hospitality, and by the good Odysseus' half, which I am approaching, that everything will happen as I said. This very month, Odysseus will be here. Between the waning of the old moon and the waxing of the new, he will come back to his home, and will punish all who dishonor his wife and his noble son. And you, Eumaeus, the swineherd, said in reply, "Old friend, that reward I will never have to pay, nor will Odysseus ever come home again. Drink in peace, and let us turn to other matters. Don't remind me of my troubles, for I tell you my heart is wrung when anyone reminds me of my dear king. As for your oath, let us forget it, and may Odysseus still come home, as I pray he will, and as Penelope does, and old Laertes and godlike Telemachus. Oh, there's another cruel anxiety for me. Odysseus' son Telemachus. The gods made him grow like a young sapling, and I had thought he would become as good a man in the world as his father, a fine-looking man, when suddenly some god or perhaps man deprived him of his wits, and off he went to holy Pylos on his father's trail. And now those lordly suitors are lying in ambush for him on his way home, hoping that godlike Odysseus' line may be wiped out of Ithaca, and the very name be forgotten. Well, we must leave him to his fate, whether they catch him, or whether Zeus stretches out his hand to save him. But now, old friend, you must tell me about your own troubles. Tell me the truth. I want to know everything. Who are you, and where do you come from? What is your city? Who are your family? And since you certainly can't have come on foot, what kind of vessel brought you here? How did its crew come to land you in Ithaca? And who did they claim to be?" The inventive Odysseus launched into his story. "I will give you a true account of all you ask. If only you and I had an endless supply of food and wine here in the hut, and so could eat in peace while the rest got on with the work. I would find it easy to talk to you for a whole year without coming to the end of my sorrows, and all the hardships that the gods have made me endure. I am a native of the broad lands of Crete, and the son of a rich man. He had a number of other sons who were born and brought up in the house, but they were the lawful issue of his wife, whereas my mother was a concubine he had bought. In spite of this difference, my father, Castor, son of Hylax, put me on an equal footing with his legitimate sons. The Cretans of his day respected and honored him like a god for his good fortune, his riches, and his splendid children. But his time came, and death bore him off to Hades' halls. His high-handed sons then split up the estate and cast lots for the shares, assigning to me a meager pittance and a house to match. However, I won a wife for myself from a rich landowning family on my own merits, for I was neither a fool nor a coward. Now it has all gone, yet I think you will still be able to see by the stubble what the harvest was like. Since then I have been overwhelmed by troubles, but in the old days Ares and Athena had endowed me generously with the daring that breaks the battle line. And when it came to planning an attack against the enemy, and I had picked my men for an ambush, my proud heart never had a foreboding of death, and I would leap out before all the rest and kill with my spear any enemy who was slower on his feet than I. That was the kind of man I was in battle. But I did not like work on the land, nor the domestic pursuits that make for a fine family of children. What I always loved was ships with oars, and fighting, and polished javelins and arrows, terrible things which make other people shudder. I suppose that my inclinations were all implanted in me by the gods, for different men find satisfaction in very different ways of earning a living. Anyhow, before the Achaean expedition ever set foot on the coasts of Troy, I had 9 times had my own command and led a well-found fleet against a foreign land. As a result, large quantities of loot fell into my hands. From this, I used to select what I liked, and a great deal more came my way by lot. In this way, my estate increased rapidly, and my fellow countrymen soon learned both to fear and to respect me. The time came, however, when all-seeing Zeus devised the dreadful adventure which laid so many men low, and they pressed me and the famous Idomeneus to lead our ships to Ilium. There was no way of avoiding it. Public opinion was too much for us. So for 9 years we Achaeans campaigned at Troy, and after sacking Priam's city in the 10th, we sailed for home, and our fleet was scattered by a god. But for my unhappy self, the inventive brain of Zeus was hatching more mischief. I had spent only a month in the delights of home life with my children, my wife, and my possessions, when the spirit moved me to fit out some ships and sail for Egypt with heroic companions. I got 9 vessels ready, and the crews were soon mustered. For 6 days my good men gave themselves up to festivity, and I provided beasts in plenty for their sacrifices and for their own table. On the 7th we embarked, said goodbye to the broad fields of Crete, and sailed off with a fresh and favourable wind from the north, which made our going as easy as though we were sailing with the current. Not a single one of my ships came to harm. We sat there safe and well while the wind and the steersman kept them on their course. On the 5th day we reached the great river of Egypt, and there in the Nile I anchored my crew of ships. Then I ordered my good men to stay by the ships on guard, while I sent out some scouts to reconnoitre from the heights. But carried away by their own violence, they went on a rampage, and immediately began to plunder some of the fine Egyptian farms, carrying off the women and children, and killing the men. The hue and cry soon reached the city, and the townsfolk, roused by the alarm, poured out at dawn. The whole place with infantry, and chariots, and the glint of arms. Zeus the Thunderous struck abject panic into my party. Not a man had the spirit to stand and face the enemy, for we were threatened on all sides. They ended up by cutting down a large part of my force with their sharp weapons and carrying off the survivors to work for them as slaves. As for myself, a sudden inspiration saved me, though I still wish I had faced my destiny and fallen there in Egypt. The trouble was in store for me. I quickly took off my fine helmet, let the shield drop from my shoulder, and threw away my spear. Then I ran up to the king's chariot and clasped and kissed his knees. Moved to pity, he spared my life, gave me a seat beside him, and so drove his weeping captive home. Many of his people, of course, were lusting for my blood and lunged at me with their ashwood spears, for they were thoroughly roused, but he kept them away for fear of offending Zeus, the stranger's god, whose wrath is aroused by deeds of cruelty. I passed several years in the country and made a fortune among the Egyptians, who were generous to me, one and all. But in the course of the 8th, I fell in with a rascally Phoenician, a thieving rogue who had already done a deal of mischief in the world. I was persuaded by his plausible talk to join him in a voyage to Phoenicia, where he had a house and estate, and there I stayed with him for a whole year. But when the days and months had mounted up, and a second year began its round of seasons, he put me on board a ship bound for Libya, on the pretext of wanting my help with the cargo he was carrying, but really to sell me for a handsome sum when he got there. Full of suspicion, but having no choice, I followed him on board. With a good stiff breeze from the north, the ship took the central route south of Crete, but Zeus had planned their destruction. When we had passed Crete, and no other land nor anything but sky and water was to be seen, he brought a dark cloud to rest above the ship. The sea below it was blackened. Zeus thundered, and in the same moment struck the vessel with lightning. The whole ship reeled to the blow of his bolt, and was filled with the smell of sulphur. The men were all flung overboard, and round the black hull they floated like seagulls on the waves. There was no home coming for them. this hour of my affliction, Zeus himself thrust into my arms the great mast of the blue-prowed ship, to allow me once again to avoid disaster. I coiled myself round it, and became the sport of the accursed winds. For 9 days I drifted, and on the 10th night in pitch darkness, a great roller washed me up on the coast of Thesprotia, where Lord Phidon, king of the Thesprotians, gave me hospitality, asking for nothing in return. His own son found me fainting from exposure and exhaustion, pulled me up by the hand, and took me home with him to his father's palace, where he gave me a cloak and tunic to wear. It was there that I heard of Odysseus. The king told me that he had entertained and befriended him on his homeward way, and showed me what a fortune in copper, gold, and wrought iron Odysseus had amassed. The amount of treasure stored up for him there in the king's house would keep a man and his heirs to the 10th generation. He added that Odysseus had gone to Dodona to learn the will of Zeus from the great oak tree that is sacred to the god, and to discover how he ought to approach his own rich island of Ithaca after so long an absence, openly or in disguise. Moreover, he swore in my presence over a drink offering in his own house that a ship was waiting on the beach with a crew standing by to convey Odysseus to his own country. But he sent me off before him because the Thesprotian ship happened to be starting for the corn island of Dulichium. He told its crew to treat me well and take me to Acastus, the king. The crew, however, saw fit to hatch a wicked plot against me, to plunge me deeper still into misery. When the ship on her journey had left land far behind, they set about their scheme to reduce me to slavery. They stripped me of my own cloak and tunic, and replaced them with a filthy set of clothes, the very rags, in fact, which you see before you now. They arrived in Ithaca when the fields lay under a clear evening sky. They lashed me down tightly under the ship's benches with a strong rope, disembarked, and hastily took their supper on the beach. But the gods found no difficulty in untying my knots for me. I wrapped my rags round my head, slipped down the smooth landing plank, quietly breasted the water, and struck out with both hands. Very soon I was out of the sea and beyond their reach. I then made my way inland to a thicket of flowering shrubs and crouched down in hiding. They searched around for me with a great deal of shouting, but soon decided that nothing was to be gained by prolonging their search, and so climbed on board their ship once more. The gods made it quite easy for me to remain unseen, and ended by guiding my
Okay, my
steps to
baby.
the home of a man of understanding.
Has
So
that little
then,
bastard been knackered
I
in?
am not yet meant to die. And you, Eumaeus, the swineherd, said in reply, "My poor friend, you've certainly touched my heart with the story of your hardships and wanderings. It is when you come to Odysseus that you go wrong, my way of thinking. You won't get me to believe that. What call is there for a man like you to tell such pointless lies? As though I didn't know all about my master's disappearance, and how the gods showed their utter hatred of him, by allowing him neither to fall in battle against the Trojans, nor to die in his friend's arms when all the fighting was over. Had he done so, the whole Achaean nation would have joined in building him a mound, and he would have left a great name for his son to inherit. But there was to be no glorious end for him. The storm fiends have spirited him away. As for myself, I'm a hermit here with my pigs, and never go to the town, except perhaps when news has arrived from somewhere and the wise Penelope invites me. On such occasions, everyone gathers round the newcomer and plies him with questions, whether they are those who are pining for their long-lost king, or those who have the satisfaction of eating for nothing at his expense. But I personally have lost all interest in such probing and questioning, since the day when a fellow from Aetolia deceived me with his tale. He had killed a man, and after being pursued all over the world, found his way to my door. I received him kindly, and he told me that he had seen Odysseus with Idomeneus in Crete, repairing the damage his fleet had suffered in a gale. He said Odysseus would be back, either in the summer or by autumn, bringing back a fortune and his gallant company. Now a god has brought you to my door, my long-suffering friend. But don't you try to gratify or soothe my heart with any falsehoods. It is not for that reason that I shall respect and entertain you, but because I fear Zeus, the patron of strangers, and pity you. But the cunning Odysseus persisted. You certainly have a very suspicious nature, he said. If not even my oath can bring you round and convince you of the truth. Come, let us make a bargain, with the gods of Olympus as witnesses to us both. If your master comes back to his house, you shall give me a cloak and tunic to wear and send me on to Dulichium, where I want to go. If, on the other hand, your master does not return, as I say he will, you shall tell your men to throw me over a precipice, just to teach the next beggar not to tell lies. Yes, cried the honest swineherd, and what fame and fortune I would win for myself in the world, once and for all, if after taking you into my hut and showing you hospitality, I was to rob you of your precious life. I would be a willing party to a crime against Zeus, son of Kronos, if I did that. However, it's supper time, and I hope my men will be in before long, so that we can prepare a tasty meal in the hut. As they were speaking, the herdsmen came up with their pigs. The men drove the animals in batches into their sties to sleep, and the air was filled with the grunting of pigs settling down for the night. The worthy swineherd called out to his men. Bring your best hog. I want to slaughter it for a guest I have here from abroad. And we'll enjoy ourselves. After all we've put up with looking after the white-tusked boars all this time, while other people live for nothing off our work. He then chopped some firewood with his sharp axe, and his men dragged in a fatted 5-year-old hog and held it by the hearth. The swineherd, who was a good and virtuous man, did not forget the immortals, but began the ritual by throwing a tuft of hair from the white-tusked victim into the fire, and praying to all the gods that the wise Odysseus might come back to his home. Then he drew himself up and struck the animal with a piece of oak which he had left unsplit. The hog fell, stunned. They slit its throat, singed its bristles, and deftly cut the carcass up. The swineherd cut pieces from all the limbs as a first offering to the gods, placed them with raw fat on the thigh bones, sprinkled them with barley meal, and threw them all onto the flames. Then they chopped up the rest of the meat, pierced it with spits, roasted it thoroughly, and after drawing it off the spits, heaped it up on platters. The swineherd, with his characteristic fairness, stood up to divide it into helpings. He carved and sorted it all out into 7 portions, one of which he set aside, with a prayer, for the nymphs and for Hermes, Maia's son, and distributed the rest to the company. But he gave Odysseus the portion of honor, the hog's long chine. This courtesy warmed the heart of his master, who turned to him and said, Eumaeus, I hope Father Zeus will look on you as kindly as I do for picking out the best portion for a man like me. And you, Eumaeus the swineherd, said in reply, Do start, my strange guest, and enjoy such food as we can offer. The god will give, and the god will take away, according to his will, for he can do everything. Then he made a burnt offering to the immortal gods of the peace he had set aside, and after making a libation of sparkling wine, handed the cup to Odysseus, the sacker of cities, and sat down to his own portion. They were served with bread by Mesaulius, a servant whom Eumaeus had procured for himself during his master's absence, acting without help from his mistress or the old Laertes, and buying the man from the Taphians with his own resources. All began to eat the good food spread before them, and when they had satisfied their hunger and thirst, Mesaulius cleared away the food. Sated by now with bread and meat, they began to prepare for bed. Night came on, bringing foul weather. There was no moon. Rain from Zeus set in for the night, and the wet west wind blew hard. Odysseus now spoke to them, intending to put the swineherd to the test and see whether, out of his obvious concern for his guest, he would take off his cloak and lend it to him, or persuade one of his men to do so. "Listen to me," he said, "Eumaeus and all of you. I am going to boast and tell you a story. This is the effect of wine. It makes people do crazy things. It sets the wisest man singing and giggling stupidly. It lures him on to dance, and it makes him blurt out what's better left unsaid.
Absolutely.
However, since I've opened my mouth, I might as well go on. I wish I was still as young and strong as I was when we led that surprise attack against Troy.